哎，好像变了一个这个96740866020。嗯，啊，错的那个东西。Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Greetings, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, now you are the co-host. Yeah, Sam. Yeah.
这个陪着我夜飘零的晚秋，才知道你不是我一生的所有。蓦然又回首，是坚强的笑容，那多少往事飘散在风中。怎么说相爱却又注定要分手？怎么能让我相信那是一场梦？缘去难留，抬头望天空，想起。
Are we going to have class? Hi, everybody. Good evening. Hi, Sam. 老师 Emily, Rose.
Good evening.
Hi, 大家好。一下吗？
Students here?
Yeah, student here. We have 6, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 6 students. Let me
Yeah.
see.
So you get a little bit the introduction.
Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to send them 2 documents in the chat. So please check the chat in a minute and download the 2 documents, which I'm going to send via the chat.
Yeah, so before the
Technology
class,
says that the first one has been sent successfully. I'm going to try sending the second one now.
okay, before the class begins, we could have a group picture. Yeah. So everyone, can you turn on your camera so we can have group picture?
For our class, yes.
Yeah.
Let me
Sia
see.
is making a video, so we need a picture of the online class. Yeah. So yeah,
Thank
can
you,
you turn on
everybody.
your
Yes,
turn on your camera? We can have a group picture.
I'm on my computer right now. I don't have a camera on here. I can swap to my
Okay.
phone though.
Yeah. If you have the camera, you can turn it on. Yeah.
OK，还有一个人不能啊，还有一个人不能打开。
What about the other students? Do you have a camera?
有3个人不行，看来。How about the other 3? 实在不行就
那我就先截个图吧。
对。Good. There's another person. Thank you. 那我们就可能就这几个人。
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, you can begin the class.
Good. Thank you. Hi, Sam. You can go ahead. Today we have lecture on literature. Welcome, Sam.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Just a reminder, I think I have to send these documents again because somebody just logged on. Or were you here from the beginning, Ayana? Your mic is muted. Do you see 2 Word files in the chat?
Yeah, I see two Word files. It's just when I'm clicking to download them, I'm having problems downloading them. I don't know what it is.
Okay, well, you will need the two of them to function effectively in class this evening. So maybe you could put an email address in the chat and I could try sending them to that email.
Okay.
Can you do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. And you need one of them for the very beginning of class. So it's important that you get it. You can let me know when you've completed sending the email because I'm not seeing one in the chat yet. I'm still not seeing it.
I'm just making sure it's the right email address.
Pardon me?
I'm just making sure it's the right email address. Actually, let's just do them. There.
Okay, I see something there now. I will try sending the two documents to that email address. So just give me a minute. Okay, Teresa and Ayana, please let me know when you have received and received the documents and open the first one that says KWLS plus chart. Okay, this part you should have your KWLS chart open. I'm going to go into screen sharing. you, Teresa and Ayana. So as you can see on your screen now, the top of this chart, there's a space to put your name. So please type your names there, first name and last name. And you can just add E to Chinese literature, which I obviously forgot to put on in line 3. Just add E. And I want you to complete the first 2 columns of this chart, moving from left to right. Know and want to know or will learn. This is a way of you, in the first instance, indicating what you know about Chinese literature, if anything. Please put it in point form. Don't write any, sentences or paragraphs. And then in the second column, writing down what you want to learn or what you think you will learn in this lesson this evening. I'm going to stop sharing this KWL chart. Go to the PowerPoint instead. Okay, so the instructions are on the screen so that nobody can be confused. So I'm going to play a piece of music, give you about 2 to 3 minutes in the first instance to list the most important things you know about Chinese literature in the K column, K for know. The most important things you know. If you know a lot of things, you don't have to write all of them, just put the most important. And then in the view column, list either what you would like to learn about Chinese literature in this lesson and or what you think you will learn about it. If you do both, what you would like to learn and what you think you will learn, start with what you would like to learn first. When you're done, leave a space and then type the things you think you will learn. So I'm going to give you about 3 minutes while the music is playing on columns K and W.
在这个陪着夜飘零的晚秋，才知道你不是我一生的所有。蓦然又回首，是坚强的笑容，那多少往事飘在风中。怎么说相爱却又注定要分手？怎么能让我相信那是一场梦？情缘去说爱我到永久，心中藏着多少爱和长，想要再次握住你的手，温暖你走后冷冷的请求，相逢也只是在梦中。怎么相爱却又注定要分手？怎么能让我相信那是一场梦？情缘去难了，我抬头望天空，想起你说爱我到永久， 其中藏着多少爱和长，想要再次握住你的手，温暖你走后冷冷的轻巧，相逢也只是在梦中。怎么说相爱却又注定要分手？怎么能让我相信那是一场梦？看着你远走，让泪往心里流，为了你付出我所有。
Alex or
What?
Grace, is
Grace?
Paige Best one of the students?
Sorry?
Is Paige Best one of the students?
Yes, Rose? Yes, I think so. You have Alex, you have Grace and Rose and
No,
David.
I'm asking you about somebody whose name is Paige Best, who I think was not here when I sent the information. Okay, Paige Best, would you please unmute your microphone and tell me if you're a student?
Yes, I'm a student.
Were you
yes.
here when I sent 2 documents which you'll need for class this evening?
No, please.
Okay, I'm going to put them in the chat. Please download them. We've already started to use one of them.
Okay.
Sam, don't worry. We have a group. Alex had, Rose has formed a group, which WhatsApp group. I think Rose can share the audio document in that group. Yeah.
Grace, I'm not understanding you.
Rose,
These are word files that I'm sending the students.
so you don't worry about that. Rose will help you
But
do that. Yes.
they need to use the word files this evening.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that.
So Paige, my technology is telling me that the word files have been sent successfully. Please let me know when you receive them while the other students tonight are sharing. Okay, now I'm going to call your names and I'm going to ask you to share in as few words as possible what you put in your K column. What do you actually know about Chinese literature? If your column is blank, just use the term that people use in Dominios and Barbados and across the Caribbean, pass. Secondly, if somebody shares something that you have, please don't repeat it. So if you're not the first person and you have something in your K column that has been said already, just share the new things with us. Okay, so let's start with Anna. Please unmute your microphone and share with us what you wrote down in the K column. What do you already know about Chinese literature?
Pass.
Okay. Jerice? Thank you. Israel?
Well, I know that like the Chinese words have like, some of them have multiple translations. So like if you might be reading the poetry, it might have a deeper meaning than just the simple translation.
Yes, that's true. So whatever is rendered, let's say in English, could be rendered another way in some instances by other people because the language might be symbolic.
Yes.
Thank you, Israel. Teresa, Ayana, Paige, do you have anything in your K columns? If you do, just unmute your mic and share with us.
I have that Chinese literature. I think it started over 3,000 years ago.
Okay, is there anything else you have, or is that it?
No, that's it.
Well, thank you. You are correct. This is an ancient literature, very old literature, far older than the literature of the Caribbean, which we would normally date from around the 1950s or 60s or so. Is there anybody else who has something to share, or shall we move on? Okay, so if you had nothing in your K column, you've now got at least 2 things there. that your classmates have shared. Okay, so I'm going back now to the PowerPoint. Going back to share screen. So this evening, as far as time management permits, we are going to examine something about the prose and poetry of Chinese literature. You're familiar with both of these terms from your CXC and previous studies. Prose referring to what we would call ordinary writing, words put down in lines, sentences, and paragraphs, and poetry referring to a whole multitude of creative ways of putting words on a page. So you've already begun by calling to mind what you know, if anything, about Chinese literature. So let's go through as much of the lesson as possible. First, we're going to have an overview of the development of Chinese ancient literature. So you know the word overview means you get, as it were, some highlights, not a lot of detail. This literature, as somebody said, is over 3,000 years old, and it's not possible to do justice to it in an evening or two. But we can begin by pointing out that in Chinese culture in ancient times, literature held a very important position. For example, one indication of that is that people who wanted to work in the government had to do an imperial exam. And part of the test involved them demonstrating their ability to write essays and to deal with poetry. So if this were Barbados 2021 and you wanted a government job, you certainly have to have good essay writing skills and an understanding of poetry. Otherwise, your chances of getting the job wouldn't be so good. As you would expect from a literature that is over 3,000 years old, it has a variety of literary types or genres, including poems, essays, novels, and plays. And these would have evolved over time. Becoming great, sometimes declining in quality as different times pass. So as we go through the lesson this evening, you will hear reference to certain periods and certain genres which either matured, developed, improved, or deteriorated at a particular time. And not unexpectedly, given the vastness of China's land and the multitudinous people that make up China, the literature of China, its traditions, have reached across the ages and across countries. So that the literature of the world has been enriched by the compositions of Chinese people. Now, we're going to take a look at this point at the historical evolution of Chinese ancient literature. And the word ancient is important. So as somebody told us, it's over 3,000 years old. And when some scholars, though not all, because scholars have a habit of disagreeing, as you would know, or you will find out. When some scholars consider Chinese literature, they normally divide it into two. And they use 1917 as the dividing year. So literature before 1917 is called ancient, and literature after 1917, when an important change of thinking and emphasis among writers occurred, literature after 1917 is categorized as modern and contemporary. Anytime before 1917, ancient. Now, according to one scholar, Professor Li Chengyu, literature is often divided in China into three historical periods, basically, called remote ancient times, anything written before the 3rd century AD, middle ancient times, that's between the 3rd century AD and the 16th century, the period of the Renaissance in Europe, and finally, near ancient times, that is anywhere between the 16th century and the century we just ended, the 20th century. So, in terms of literature of the remote ancient times, that is also subdivided into stages. As you can see on your screen, there's a preaching literature that is a particular dynasty. So literature written before that is categorized as stage 1 of the remote ancient times. And as you would expect, this writing would have had certain characteristics. Perhaps the most important two are that when we think of literature in the Caribbean, and as students who've just left secondary school, for example, you think of poems and plays and novels, short stories. But in ancient China, literature involved historical ratings or rating of history as well as philosophical ratings. And you can see here a list of those things. Now, I know you're not going to remember all of these things, and there's no need to. It is just to give you a sense, and the PowerPoint will be made available to you eventually, a sense that there are particular works which represent the preaching literature, both historical in nature and philosophical. Perhaps you've heard of the name Confucius. Perhaps you've heard the word Tao or Taoism. Maybe you've not heard of the Moy school. So there were lots of various philosophical schools, people who were engaged in thinking at a very high level, a very extraordinary or unusual level, and they produced lots of ratings. And these ratings of the philosophers and the historical works would have been considered part of the body of Chinese ancient literature. So here's an example of one of the works from the remote ancient times. This is a very famous collection, anthology. It is China's first anthology of poems, and it's called the Book of Songs. And you'll discover, if you do any reading or you listen to any talks or view any videos, that over the course of Chinese literature, a lot of the poetry was intended to be sung in accompaniment with musical instruments. So it's not surprising that the title of this first anthology is Book of Songs. Now, another important work from the ancient remote times is something called Verses of Chu. And one scholar points out that Chu State is the equivalent of today's Hubei and Hunan. And this particular collection of poetry would have, among other things, described much of the landscape, the mountains, the rivers. It would have given expression to the thoughts of the poets about the history and culture and the people who live there. And there's one particular writer who is credited with producing the majority of this work. Perhaps Grace or Alex or Rose could pronounce the name correctly for me. Or not. And this poet, whose name is written down here in blue, is considered China's first great poet.
Oh, this one, Qu Yuan. Qu Yuan. Yeah.
Now, in the second stage of the remote ancient times period of Chinese literature, this would have been the dynasties of the Qing and the Han. Again, there are particular things that characterize or dominate or stand out or are considered to represent literature at that point. According to the same professor I referred to before, the literature of this period was not as impressive than the previous one. And the greatest prose work, the greatest work written in paragraphs and sentences and so on, as opposed to poetry, is the records of the grand historian by this person whose name one of the Chinese teachers will again pronounce for us.
Yeah, Sima Qian. Yeah, Sima Qian.
And we are told that what makes this work, Records of the Grand Historian, important in literary terms is that the style of telling the story, the narration, is outstanding, as is the way in which the characters in the story have been represented. As it were, this was a kind of unprecedented piece of writing. Nobody had told history in quite this way before. But this is a work that Chinese people will certainly know of, and all students of literature would be familiar with its significance. But in the second stage, continuing of the remote ancient times literature, the period of the Qing and the Han, in addition to the historical ratings that we just referred to, poetry, we are told, also had a new life. It became more appealing to people. It was considered to be of greater artistic merit. And two works that characterize this period are the Yufu folk songs and something called 90 ancient poems, which express with plain language and honesty and were popular across the country such experiences of human beings as separation, frustration, worries about the unpredictability of life. We could certainly appreciate that today, living in the times of COVID. And we are told these particular writings still appeal to people or resonate with people, readers, thousands of years later. And this is a feature of Chinese literature, which you will meet again and again if you study it, that things written hundreds and thousands of years ago are still alive in the language, in the conversation, in the thinking of many people in China. Though, of course, not all. There's no country where everybody is equally interested or learned about everything. So, in the first stage now of the Middle Ancient Times, so we've left the remote ancient times, the first stage that is identified as the Wei and Jing periods or dynasties to the mid-Tang dynasties, we are told that poetry composition was excellent. And a number, many, and you know China has a vast population, many brilliant poets emerged, wrote works during this time. And one of the things that characterized their writings was that each poet's personality was reflected or echoed in the style of his or her composition. So if you were a lover of literature, sooner or later, you'd begin to recognize that a particular piece of poetry had been composed or penned by a particular person, because the personality of the author was echoed in the writing style. Some of the writings of that period have been defined in various ways, as again, one of the Chinese speakers can pronounce this for us, this particular style here, which is supposed to be characterized by fervency and solemnity. Are my Chinese teachers there, or have they gone on vacation? Okay, they've gone on vacation.
建安 style.
Thank you. And the second one?
正史. Yeah.
Which was a different kind of emphasis in terms of what the poets wrote. So their poetry was infused with sorrow and joy for life, and it seemed to reflect a rational kind of thinking, a reasoning approach to life rather than a primarily emotional one. So we're told that this particular period, the Tang Dynasty, was a period that saw laudable or praiseworthy literature, that the things that were written in that period continue to influence later generations of writers and how they think about poetry and what it should do. Now, still staying in the Middle Ancient times, we're moving on to stage 2. This is from the middle of the Tang Dynasty to the fall of the Southern Song Dynasty. Again, I know you won't remember all of this, but the PowerPoint will be made available to you. So, as with the preceding periods, there are certain achievements and characteristics of literature in this time. The most important, in the view of some scholars, was something called the classical prose movement. For hundreds of years, Chinese literature had been written in a language called classical Chinese. And we are told that most of the people in China actually couldn't read this. So that literature was not something to which they had access. Inevitably, I would say, some writers and scholars came to the belief that literature should be written in a way that people, ordinary people, would be able to read it and understand it. So there was a movement called the classical prose movement. And this movement championed or advocated changes in the styles of literature, the types of literature or genres that were being composed, and the language in which literature was being written. We are told it was initiated, the movement, by somebody called Han Yu in the Tang Dynasty, and continued by various people afterwards. And this movement to champion or to promote the writing of literature in the language that people actually spoke and used on an everyday basis had a far-reaching, long-lasting, profound effect on the development of prose writing in China. Still staying with the Middle Ancient times, in stage 2, we are told from the middle of the Tang Dynasty to the fall of the Southern Song Dynasty, characteristics and achievements of that period included the fact that poetry underwent a new set of developments in a new set of directions. And one of the outstanding forms of poetry that emerged at that time is something called, one of the Chinese teachers would pronounce it for us, the name I read.
Yeah, 词 poetry.
Poetry, yes.
词 yeah.
And this stands as a representative of the literary achievements of the Song dynasty. And we had, again, not surprisingly, different, as it were, camps of writers with different emphases. So these people here on this line, their poetry is considered to be bold and unconstrained, whereas the poetry written by these people on the last line is defined as graceful and restrained. So if you were to look at the poetry of that period, you would see, as it were, two broad varieties. And of course, you would be free to choose one, the other, or both. Now, in the second stage of the Middle Ancient Times literature of China, we read that there were some other developments in literature. One of them is that legends were very common and appealing to people. And you know, basically a legend is a story that is based on some degree of reality, though not everything is necessarily true. And secondly, and you will see how this ties in with something we said before, vernacular novels with colloquial language emerge. So when you see the word vernacular, it means this is something that is produced by ordinary people, not by specialists and scholars. And it will tend to focus subject-wise on the lives of those people. And as you can see, instead of the classical Chinese that literature had been written in for hundreds of years, now these authors are using the language commonly spoken by the people, colloquial language. So this represents a significant change in the tradition of ancient Chinese literature. And it plays a foundation for the language, the styles of storytelling and so on that would be used in novels in later ages, such as this one. The final stage, the third stage of the literature of the Middle Ancient Times, we see certain characteristics and achievements again. One of these is that now novels and traditional Chinese opera, which you will have a class on, begin to replace poems and essays as the most important, most commonly produced forms of literature. So where before you had poetry and essays, now it is storytelling, forms of storytelling that become dominant. Secondly, there's a particular kind of drama here by the second bullet that reaches a point of excellence. So when people think about literary drama in China, this is a period that they would often refer to as being characterized by wonderful plays being written. And very importantly, long vernacular novels were written, including two of the top four, according to scholars, called Romance of the Three Kingdoms and Water Margin. So this period, the third stage of the Middle Ancient Times, from the Yang Dynasty to the Mid-Ming Dynasty, is a period of significant literary achievement and changes in the history of Chinese literature. Now we come to the third of those three broad groupings of ancient Chinese literature. Remote ancient times, we've looked at before. We looked at Middle Ancient times, and now we are coming to Near Ancient times. This is from the middle of the Ming Dynasty. You'll hear about that when you look at pottery. You've probably heard about it if you looked at martial arts movies, until the period of the Opium War in 1840. And what were the characteristics and achievements of Near Ancient times in the first stage? Well, popular literature, which we talked about just now, the vernacular novels and so on, and dramas, continue to dominate instead of poems and essays. And novels become particularly outstanding. So you have a number of works written during that period that are regarded as the peak of excellence in Chinese literature in terms of novel writing. Journey to the West, Dream of the Red Chamber, Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. The scholars will be among them. Now, after the Opium War, that's the next phase of the literature of the Near Ancient Times. So this is the Mid-Ming Dynasty and to the beginning of the literary revolution that we talked about 10 minutes ago in 1917. So after the Opium War, in terms of the socio-economic and political situation in China, China was gradually reduced from a feudal society that it would be one in which the nobles, the emperor, and so on would be in charge of the resources, the land mainly, and so on. And people, as it were, would be people living on it and having to pay rent and do service and give military service as required. That's what a feudal society is. So China was gradually reduced or altered from a feudal society to a semi-colonial and semi-feudal society. And one of the things that would have been happening would be that in this point, countries outside of China would have gone into China to become involved or to interfere with Chinese autonomy. So going along with the social changes brought about historically, there were also changes in the thinking or the ideas about literature and the composition of literature. Among writers and scholars, literature began to be considered a tool for improving the society. So the idea was that when people wrote literature, whatever form it was supposed to make society better. Secondly, the literature of the West, Europe, and so on, began to gradually exert an influence on Chinese literature. So that ultimately there was new thinking and new styles of literature that were emerging within the framework of traditional Chinese literature. So over and over, we get this motif, this recurring reality, that in this country, vast and varied in peoples, in landscape, and so following, and experiences politically, socially, and economically, things are always in a state of flux. Greater change at some periods, lesser change in other periods, but always change. So in 1917, there was something called the May 4th New Cultural Movement. And one of the events in terms of that movement was one of significance for literature in Chinese culture. And it's called the Literary Revolution of 1917. So at that point, all sorts of political turmoil was going on. A number of people were dissatisfied with how the representatives of China had represented the country elsewhere in the world. And so a new thinking began to be articulated, so that Chinese literature, which had lasted for thousands of years, entered what some scholars consider a brand new era. And as you would have heard just now, two of the features characterizing this period of the literary revolution in 1917 are that writers became opposed to using classical Chinese, and they promoted the use of the language the people actually were using. Secondly, they rejected the old literature, and I want you to remember this, especially for Thursday, they rejected the old literature and they promoted or advocated adopting new literature as a representative of the people, the nation, and so following. At this point, I want you to stop and think. Stop and think. And then you're going to talk. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to stop and think. What have you found out about Chinese literature so far that is either obvious or unexpected? If it's obvious, why is it obvious? If it's unexpected, why is it unexpected? Take 5 minutes and jot down your responses. You don't have to write grammatical sentences, just make sure what you jot down can be read. And you're going to do this in the same Word document that is the KWL chart. So take 5 minutes. Think about what you've heard about Chinese literature so far. Is there anything that you heard that is obvious? Is there anything that you heard that was unexpected? Whatever the answer is, tell us the reasons. And then we're going to get you to share after your 5 minutes for stopping, thinking, and writing have gone by. Okay, in a minute from now, we'll be inviting you to share your observations with us. You'll remember to unmute your mic. Make sure you're close enough, the volume is good enough, that we can all hear and understand you in a minute from now. Okay, everybody, so please, one at a time, unmute your microphone and go ahead and share with us what you wrote in response to the question of what you had come across in this presentation that was expected or unexpected in relation to Chinese literature.
Maybe we can start with Israel.
I'm hearing a voice, but not very well.
Oh, this is Leah Rose. I am just maybe wondering if we could start with Israel.
Still not very well, Aaliyah Rose. I don't know if you need to get closer, if you need to increase the volume or both.
She was just saying to start with me.
Oh, to start with Israel, go ahead, Israel.
I found it pretty obvious that there was the movement away from the poems to the novels. And
Can you explain to us why? Don't forget the why as well.
or it's just because just from how it is worldwide, like that's like the trend, because people more are interested in the stories than, I guess, like, I mean, poems are less interesting for the majority of people than a story would be.
Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Please
and
continue.
I found it kind of weird that they rejected the old literature, because it's kind of weird for people to reject their past culture.
Okay. Ayana Holder is saying the same. I'm not too sure if that means she won't be able to talk to us, so she's using the chat. Thank you, Israel. Who's next?
I don't know. What I meant was that I also found it very weird because most of the time people tend to like hold on to their past and want to like keep historical stuff. So the mere fact that they were so ready to reject it, I thought that was also shocking.
Okay. But just remember, I didn't tell you that they rejected it. What I told you was that some writers and thinkers were promoting the rejection. So think about Barbados right now. The Prime Minister and the authorities are on the various forms of media trying to encourage as many Barbadians as possible, preferably all, to take a vaccine against COVID-19. Agreed? However, there are some people who do not want to take the vaccine. So you see, it wouldn't be true to say, to give the impression that the vast majority of people in China rejected the ancient literature. What we're saying is that there was a movement among some writers and some thinkers to promote a different emphasis. Are you with me, Israel and Ayana?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. All right. Who's going to contribute next?
Oh, wait, sir. Another thing that I found interesting was that their personality was echoed in their writing style. Like I know for me, when I read a lot of stuff, it's mostly comics, so you can tell like the art style based on the writer. But in terms of just the writing alone, I think that's impressive.
Okay. Understood. Jerice, Paige, Charissa, what are your contributions?
So
Oh, sorry.
you could go ahead.
Okay. One thing that I found expected was how in the beginning literature was not easily accessible to everybody, and that it was more like an academic kind of thing instead of like a common person thing.
Please tell us where you found that or find it unexpected.
No, I said I found it expected.
Okay, well, tell us why. Don't forget why. Why is a very important
Because
question.
majority, I mean, even right now, like there's a lot of like academic texts and stuff that's not easily accessible to people who are not academics. And from what I understand, especially with like Chinese literature, it'll be written very traditional. And I think there are different writing styles as well. And I think there'll be like an academic writing style, and then there'll be like a common person writing style. So they wouldn't be able to read it even if they could get access to it.
Yes, so remember we indicated a few times in the presentation the difference between the classical Chinese language used and something called vernacular or colloquial language, the one spoken by people using their everyday lives. Okay, are we going to hear from Teresa?
Yeah, so I
Please go
found
ahead.
it. Pardon?
Wait, I'm getting confused. Can we hear from Miss Coppin and then from Teresa? Just in case I'm calling the names wrong and confusing you. All right, let's hear. Charissa, if you're ready, go ahead, because I'm not seeing Miss Coppin's microphone unmuted.
Okay. So I found it obvious, like Israel would have said as well that the literature would have graduated from poems to novels, because most of the time people go into storytelling in history and it tends to have more detail than a poem. So, and then for the unexpected, I also put that how some writers rejected some of the history. And I had the same reasoning as some of the others, where like I thought most people tend to hold on to the history and stuff like that.
Okay, before you go, Charissa, you're Barbadian. Which country are you from?
I'm Barbadian.
Can you think of any parallels in Barbadian literature where people either want to write in the style that was traditional, whatever that was, or they favor a new style? Do any examples come to mind? Have you met any in your education? If nothing comes, that's all right. If you think of anything in the future, you can let us know either today or on Thursday.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Coppin, are we going to hear from you or shall we continue?
Sir, I just spoke.
Wait, I'm totally confused now. On my screen, there is a CHARISSA, and on my screen, there is a JHAYRISE Coppin. Are you one and the same person?
Yes, and I just spoke before Carissa spoke. I was talking about accessibility of the literature.
Oh, okay, all right. My apologies. You know, this environment is something challenging to navigate. H, have we heard from you? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Something I found unexpected was that not many people knew how to speak the grammar of the ancient literature.
Or let's say read it, because it was used for writing rather than for talking.
Right.
Understand?
Yes.
All right. Okay. At this point, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and screen sharing. But first, do you want a 5-minute break now, or do you want it later? If you want it now, go to the reactions button and click on the thumbs up option. Okay, I'm not seeing any thumb, so we are going to proceed apace. So I'm going to briefly now look at the major characteristics of, oh, I'm not screen sharing mode yet, so let's do that. Here we go. Yes. So now I'm going to take a whirlwind look at some of the major characteristics of Chinese literature. As you can see, as you will see, there's information on the slides which I will not verbalize because I'm going to make the slide available to you. And some of this repeats information you've already heard. I'm just going to hit the highlights, key points, the main characteristics of ancient Chinese literature. So, one of them is that there are concepts or ideas about literature which are unique in Chinese literature. You don't commonly find them in literatures in other parts of the world. Secondly, the literature of China is a literature characterized by a vast array or variety of artistic approaches. Think of people who paint, oil paint, watercolor, sculpture, carving, and so following, iron work, wire work, a whole variety of ways of expressing human creativity. So when you engage with the literature of China, you will find that there are many, many different styles of composition. Thirdly, and this is a point that we were just engaging with, in the tradition, there was a separation between language meaning used by people, spoken by people in their everyday lives, and the language in which literature was written. And finally, a fourth major characteristic of Chinese literature is that for hundreds of years, poems and essays were considered the superior literary forms. Now, in ancient Greece, the superior literary form was the play, the drama. And in modern times, well, not modern times, but in the Western world, ultimately, poetry had high status, but this was ultimately superseded in many instances, as you would have observed, by the novel, the rise of the narrative. So these are four major characteristics of Chinese literature. Unique ways of thinking about literature, what it's for, what it should be like in nature, how you actually compose literature, the fact that there was a language used for literature that was not the language used for ordinary conversation and living, and that in this culture for hundreds of years, poetry and essay writing were considered superior to other forms of literature. I'm just going to skip through a number of slides that elaborate on those 4 points. And stop at this one that tells us that around the beginning of the 20th century, then feudalism declined in China, as we heard, and China became a semi-colony, semi-feudal society, that writers began to appreciate the huge role or part played by novels and plays in enlightening people and reforming thinking. So here's a quotation, the last bullet on this slide. I want to have a look at it from this particular Chinese person, who says the reform of the novel should come before the reform of the nation's populace. So that epitomizes or represents in the best possible way the new thinking about how important novels were. That if you want to change a country, you want to change a culture, you should actually change a particular literary form first, as when people read this, then this would have a powerful transforming effect on them. The reform of the novel should come before the reform of the nation's populace. Okay, all right. Now I'm going to skip this question that I had there for you because we had to use up a little thing dealing with technological matters. And we're going to come now to, having heard a lot about novels and prose works, about the 4 classic novels of Chinese literature, the 4 classic novels. Now, you know the word classic fundamentally means something which is considered to be of excellent quality and to be very old. Notice I put the excellent quality first, because you can have a modern classic. But if it's just old and foolish, nobody considers it a classic. So anything that's called classic normally means it is something valued, considered worthwhile and deeply appreciated, and often old. Here are some images of these 4 classic novels and 1 or 2 of the authors of them. This first one here is Journey to the West. The second one is The Three Kingdoms, or The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And there isn't unanimity among the scholars as to who actually wrote this. Then there is, thirdly, Water Margin, in terms of the authorship of this particular third one here. And lastly, there is The Dream of the Red Chamber. And this is a statue of the author of that work. Now, at this point, I'm going to invite you to view a video. And in the same Word file with the KWL chart, I want you to type the name of one of the 4 classic novels you think might be most appealing to you. So we've just gone through the names, you're going to see them again. Which one of these 4 do you think, based on what you see and or hear, would be most appealing to you if you had to pick one to read? And then jot down as well 1 or more reasons for your choice. So which one of these 4 classic novels do you think you would find the most interesting, and why would that be? So we should be in video mode. Let's go with the short video. Let's stop sharing and make sure that we've activated all of the appropriate things for the video to work. So coming up in 30 seconds should be a short video clip. Turn off this one. Turn on this one. Make sure they're seeing here.
Could you make it bigger?
Okay,
Make
please.
it larger. Yes, please. Yes. Make it larger, please. Could you? Maybe zoom you can see the right
Okay,
side.
please hold on, because I'm shuttling between 2 computers to make sure that you're seeing on your screens what I want you to see. So I'll enlarge it and I'll turn up, I can't turn up the volume. I think the volume is up to all already in the
volume is good, but the
settings for the speakers, but I will check. Okay, so let me check on the settings. Come on, Sam, how do you get into this? Oh, audio settings. Okay, output volume. Okay, that's up to all. Okay, Grace, I've raised the output volume, but really it's just background music, so it's the text that you're really focusing on. And I'll make the PowerPoint image bigger.
Yes, please. Yes.
Is that better?
Better. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So let's start it again. Okay. So there you have a little snapshot of each of these 4 novels. I'll put the names back up on the screen in a minute. I want you, based on what you saw, to pick one of them that if you had a choice, you would read and say why, just very briefly in your Word file that you are working with. And then I'm going to try sending you some documents to use for the next activity. So first, let me put the names of the literary works back up. Okay, so you have Romance of the Three Kingdoms. You've got Journey to the West. So Journey to the West, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Water Margin, and finally, Dream of the Red Chamber. So let's go through them one more time. Dream of the Red Chamber, Water Margin, or 108 Heroes of the Marsh, or Outlaws, if you prefer, Three Kingdoms, and Journey to the West. Which of those four do you think you would find most appealing and why? Just jot down your responses in your Word file. While you're doing that, I will try to upload the next document that I want you to be interfacing with. Okay, fam, let's go and find these documents. Where would they be? Okay, share, oh no, not share screen. This is chat. Scan this. Computer. Dream of my chamber. Hey, everybody, I have in the chat summaries of each of these four classic novels of Chinese literature. And I also emailed them to Charissa, and I don't remember who the other student is who was having some challenges technologically. She couldn't download things from the chat. So if you are one of those students and you can't download from the chat, just send them to the same email address I sent the KWL chart. So just go to the bottom of your Zoom panel, find the reactions button and click on a thumbs up. Let me know that you have got those four documents. Okay, Miss Coppin, I see your thumbs up. Miss Holder, yes. 2 of 6, 33 and a third percent. We can do better, hopefully, technologically. So far,
Hi,
only 2.
sir. I don't think I can download from the chat. So can you email it to me also?
So Paige, Israel, anybody that I didn't see a thumbs up from, what's going on?
Sorry, my bad. I got it.
Okay, I believe I got them, says Miss Smith. Okay, I'm seeing Carissa's thumbs up. Israel, are you there or have you been lost in cyberspace?
I got it. I got it. I thought you had heard me.
Okay, you are having technological problems. Your rectangle is lighted up, but I can't hear you. Your microphone is also muted at this point. Okay, thank you, Israel. I can see the chat message. So, just now, mute your mics if you can and talk. If not, your case, Israel, I guess you'll be using the chat. Just tell us briefly which particular one of the classic 4 novels you said you'd be most likely to find appealing, and briefly why that is. Let's start with Anna. Okay, Israel is first. Okay, can see that your
you can hear me right now?
technology is saying you want to talk. Go ahead, Israel.
You can hear me? You cannot hear me?
Okay, that's not working. You may have to stick to the chat. Diana, Miss Coppin, Miss Smith, Miss Bess.
Hi, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, Miss Smith, go ahead.
Oh, but I was hearing Israel. I don't know why you couldn't hear him. Okay.
I am not hearing you either, although your panel is lighted up. So what's going on, people? Are we getting the computer poltergeist?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear
It's
Israel.
my mic that's muted. Oh dear.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
That's
Israel, do you want to
because
go ahead?
I'm switching between
It's
computers,
fine. You can go.
eliminate feedback. Okay, so Ayana, you go, and then Israel, you can follow her.
Oh, okay.
Wait, me?
Which of the 4 novels and why?
Okay, so Journey to the West. The only reason is because I saw the movie before, so I already know what it was about. And you know, when people say novels have more detail than movies, so that was why.
Okay, that's a logical human reason. Nothing wrong with that. Israel?
I think I will find Water Margin the most interesting because of the topic of rebellion, and like I would want to know like why the Chinese government would still allow it to be read, because I know that like especially from their way of thinking, that you can see that they say change the novels and we can change the people, and I know that they have
that was the view of one person, not necessarily a representative government view. But I understand what you're saying.
I think they do have that view because they do censor stuff. Like they heavily censor, like even novels. Like you cannot write certain novels without being censored, or like certain chapters will be censored out of the novels. So they do have. So I do. So I would want to see, one, why this novel would be still allowed, and 2, like just because it's a classic, I think I would find it interesting.
Okay, just remember that censorship is not exclusive to China though. Countries all over the world censor writers and artists of all kinds, right? So it's just that the media might give us the impression, a certain impression about China, but people have had it's put on their lives. Salman Rushdie for the Satanic Verses, people like a poet, an African-American poet in the United States has had difficulty getting his poem published. Somebody blew up America. And of course, he only managed to get it published because he went to a publishing house in one of the islands in the Caribbean, St. Martin. So censorship is not exclusive to China. Other people, so we've heard from Ayana and Israel, Miss Coppin, Aisha, Paige.
I also picked Journey to the West, but I picked it because I've actually watched anime adaptations of it. So I thought it'd be interesting to actually read the original literature and then see like where they got aspects from the show that I watched from it.
Yes, because if you're interested in stories, it can always be informative to compare an original to an adaptation in whatever media, whether it's film, it's the stage, opera, or whatever. Okay, thinking all of you. That's Ayana, Sharissa, and Israel. Paige, did I hear from you? I forget. Ms. Smith, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. For me, I picked Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Initially, when I first read the name, I thought it would have been like secret romance between the kingdoms. But then when I think about it more, because when you said to write in the word file what we think about it, I was like, maybe it's about the kingdoms reuniting or how they got entangled with each other and all these things like that. So I'm not sure, but that's why I picked it.
So the title has a suggestiveness that attracts you.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yes. It testifies to the power of words, and that if you're a writer, whether you're writing a song, you're writing a movie, you're writing a novel or a poem or an essay or whatever it is, your title is the first line of engagement with your reader, unless, of course, there's some sort of cover artwork that could pull their attention in. Very good. So now what I'd like you to do, I have emailed to you summaries of those 4 works. Whichever work you chose, open the Word file that has a summary of that particular work. So you're not going to read all 5 of these things. You're only, 4. You're only going to read the one related to the text that you chose. And there's a question that I want you to respond to, so I'm going to find it in the PowerPoint. Let's see, so that you're focused rather than confused. Okay, so here we go. So read. You should be able to see on your screen now, insights from a classic novel. Because in this course, the expectation is you will have a better, richer, deeper, broader understanding of China should you choose to go there or live there or work there or study there from doing this course. So read the summary of the chosen novel. And some of you have the advantage that you've seen the story in anime or whatever it is. And having read it, list the insights it gives directly and openly, or suggests about any of these 3 things or anything else that comes to your mind that I did not write down. When you read this summary, does it give you any insight directly or by implication into Chinese culture generally? Does it suggest anything about what is important or has been over time in China? The values, the morality, the principles of right behavior, how people ought to relate, their relationship to the government's relationship to the people, people's relationships to one another. Thirdly, does the summary give you any insight into the influence or impact of this novel itself? How has it affected generations, writers, readers, anything like that? So again, you're jotting down these things in as few words as possible. You don't have to be concerned about grammatical English, just that when you put it on paper, anybody who reads English will understand what you're saying. List the insights this particular summary gives you into Chinese culture generally, Chinese values, and or the influence of the novel itself. Now, some of you have a fairly shortish summary. Some of you have a longer one. So I'm going to give you roughly 10 minutes. I'm going to ask you in that time, if you're finished, if you're ready, if you already know the story, as some of you said, like Journey to the West, what you can do is don't read every single word. You can use a technique called skimming. You're looking for a particular thing, words and sentences that give you insights about the culture, the values, or the novel itself. You're not reading every word because you already know the story. But if you don't, you probably need to read every word. Okay, so I'll be quiet now and give you your 10 minutes.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Sir.
Hi, Sam.
Hi, I was just asking if it's about all three or we could only write on one point.
Let me yeah. Yes, Sam. Yeah.
Yes, please. Tell me who you are.
Right, Jerry's copying.
Cherise, your question is?
If we have to write on A, B, and C, or if we could
No,
only
no,
write
it
on
is
one
your
of them.
choice. It's
Okay,
your
okay.
choice.
All right, thanks. And are we putting
Because
this in the
you-
Word document?
Yes, please. Everything that you're writing is going into your Word document.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Volume. Are we there or thereabouts? Okay. SOS, come in, come in. Can you hear me? I am like Abba sending out an SOS. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I can.
You're wonderful. Are you ready? Almost ready? Nearly ready? Just about ready? I'm not hearing a word. Are you ready?
I'm mostly ready. I'm not
That's
sure about
so
anybody
it-
else.
Right, you are almost ready. What about Miss Coppin, Miss Best, Miss Smith, Miss
Almost.
Holder?
Almost ready.
Oh, okay, that's 2 up 6. Yes, Paige, I didn't hear that. There was a flicker of I'm giving a response, but I didn't get anything.
I was saying almost.
Okay, 3 almost. Okay.
Almost ready.
Thank you, Miss Smith. 4 of 6, 66.6%. So for those of you with functioning microphones and cameras, when you come to share at this point, please turn on your camera. This is practice for Thursday, and this is practice for the final part of the program when you will have to do stand and deliver presentations. So you want to practice and get accustomed to being in front of your technological camera. That's the only way we're going to see you in the current situation. Okay, I think we should transition, recommence now. Even if you haven't captured in your Word document everything you intend to. So those of you who have functioning cameras, would you go first?
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Israel. Can't see you, but I can hear you. Now I can see you. Very good.
So mostly what I was reading from it was
Wait, hold on. You have to begin by telling us which novel you chose. We wouldn't remember.
Okay, I chose The Water Margin.
Mm-hmm.
And in The Water Margin, the outlaws they wouldn't have really been rebels, but their existence was kind of against what the current emperor wanted because he felt they were too powerful. But the fact that they were like fighting against him and fighting against his troops made them rebels. Now, I would have found that they didn't really rebel because after they got his approval, after he said, "I'm gonna stop hunting you guys down," they quelled a rebellion, meaning that they still would have been thinking about the Chinese people and like having respect for him as the authority in control. So that will show their values, the Chinese values of like fight for your rights, but still remember the people and respect the people in authority. You will also see that even afterwards, after they lost many people and it would have been a few of them left back, we would see that they came to get a government position, and they would have been betrayed by the emperor and gotten killed because it would have been a trap. And this would just show that their mindset of like, if we can't trust you, even after you've been hurt and you have like given in to us, we would still kill you just to like a saying that they will have would be like pull up from the roots to like make sure that there's no like danger left back. You understand?
I do. And I hope as you read that summary and you were thinking along those lines, you were also thinking about the contemporary applications of these things, given that this literary work is from a long, long time ago. People who are outside what is considered acceptable by the authorities and societies, but who may be, quote, rehabilitated or integrated into the status quo, people who have some degree of patriotism, who have something to offer, and who, if a right relationship is formed, can be a benefit to society rather than a menace to society. Think about Barbados and, for example, quote, the boys on the block, whom the Prime Minister and the current government have reached out to in diverse ways by providing opportunities which are intended to help them see themselves as worthwhile, make something of themselves and contribute to society. So this is a issue or a challenge or a need that is universal, not exclusive to China. Thank you, Israel. Next person.
So I chose the Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gives insight to like the power struggle that was occurring in China at the time between Wei, Shu, and Wu, or something like that. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Dear no, Miss, that's good so far, but I want you to elaborate on that a little bit. Are you Barbadian?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you find anything in there that resonates with you, that reflects your society? Are power struggles only going on in ancient China? Any power struggles going on in Barbados, for example?
I would say at one point.
So we don't have emperors and we don't have dynasties. What do we have that, if you listen to the media, the newspaper, the radio, the TV, clearly there are power struggles going on, however small they might be?
Between Democratic parties, like the BLP.
Any names come to mind?
Names?
Yeah, or you don't follow politics that closely. Like who's the leader of the Democratic Party, the leader of the BLP,
Oh, I don't know. I just know our two most recent prime ministers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
So you definitely might want to improve on your political involvement, engagement, or awareness, especially if you're going to go to China or any other place in the world, right? Because that's part of how the society operates. So, we have to be aware of that. Thank you, Ms. Coppin.
Yes.
Okay, who's next?
Wait, I'm Carissa, not.
Oh dear, that same problem again. But I thought just now I was told these are the same people on two different devices with two different names.
The names are similar. Hers is Carissa, my name is Jerry's. So I guess that's a confusion.
All right, my apologies. So Jerry's, you go ahead.
I picked Journey to the West, and I picked religious piety. Because of the piety, right? The importance of Buddhism in Chinese culture, especially ancient Chinese culture. And because I actually watched something inspired by this, I actually know that the story is actually very spiritual, and it brings up a lot of like situations where spirituality is questioned and stuff. Is actually really interesting. But yeah, so I put religious piety.
Okay, and Jerry's, are you a person of religious or spiritual inclinations?
I like to think myself agnostic.
Okay. Do you find yourself aware of, involved in, or confronted by or conscious of conflicts centering around belief systems and religion and so on in your personal life?
In my personal life?
No, when I say, sorry, not personal life meaning your life, but I mean in your contemporary world, the world that you're part of.
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
Like right now in Barbados, with with the religious people who are using God as an excuse not to get a vaccine, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay. Or should we say an explanation rather than an excuse?
I see it as an excuse.
Okay. So I will put words in your mouth then. No problem. Yeah. An excuse. Thank you, Jerry's. Okay. So we've heard from Israel, Teresa, and Jerry's. That leaves us with Ayana, Aisha, and Paige.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Hi everyone.
Hello.
So the novel that I picked was Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So this is what I wrote on it. After reading a brief summary of the novel, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I see how it has impacted Chinese culture in the sense of their values and morals. In this novel, having the character E is a great value. The character of E combines is combined of the sheep, which means prosperity, and I, which means myself. And I think it was said it's originated from an ancient fighting tool. Also in the novel, they were saying that the protagonists usually have the character E, and they usually prospered, and the antagonists who did not have the character E or lacked the character E usually suffered. For example, one of the protagonists was a warrior, Wang Ju, and we see, and the summary said that later on, the people built temples in remembrance of him, in memory of him, as he had a great character of E, sorry. And I see that has been passed down to generations after generations, where we teach people to be loyal, to be selfless, to be true and righteous. And we see that the bond, the brotherhood between the general and the king of Lubai. Sorry if I'm pronouncing these things really wrong. Right?
It's a foreign language, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And we see that the bond between them went a very long way. So that's what I gathered from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. So it was indeed, when I was saying that it could be about uniting or entanglement between the kingdoms, it was basically the three kingdoms starting out at first to say how we should come together. But in reality, they were just fighting each other to show who is more on top and, well, who wanted the kingdom. So yeah.
Do you see my response, Ms. Smith?
Pardon?
Do you see my response?
As in you nodding your head?
No, as in my reaction button option. Not seeing it on your screen. And do you see Teacher Grace's response as well, or did it vanish before you saw it?
I didn't see it, sorry.
So Teacher Grace, if you would put back up your response again, do you see it now?
Perfect, very good.
Yes, I see it, thank you.
Wonderful, okay, all right. So I think we have one or two more people left, and we've got just a few minutes because we have to be in another class before 6 o'clock. So go ahead, seize the day, strike while the iron is hot, and share with us what you chose and what insights, if any, you got from the summary of your classic novel. Miss Holder, second last amount equals, but 3 minutes good.
Journey to the West. and even though it was like a 16th century movie, this is like 5 centuries later. I mean, novel. 5 centuries later, there was like movies. And when I was reading the summary, because I watched it when I was pretty young, but when I was reading the summary, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly like a webtoon that I've been reading for the last 2 years, based on the Monkey King and his travels and friendships that he's making and stuff. And I'm just here like, wow. Honestly thinking I thought the webtoon that I was reading was like an original idea, but clearly not. They took it from that. Because I mean, yeah, it's shocking. It's amazing that you know the storyline has been passed down centuries later and it's still being told, but it's being told in different, like more relatable ways according to, I guess, the particular century. But yeah, that's what I got.
Thank you, Diana. That's very insightful and important. It testifies to the power that literature can have. If it's well executed, it will resonate with people. And in the 21st century, when we have so many technological possibilities, there are all kinds of ways in which it can be presented in a contemporary manner. And yes, if you think about Hollywood, Black Panther, The Avengers, and several hit movies that have come out in the last 5 years or so, they actually draw on literature in inverted commas, whether it was a comic, it was Greek mythology or something that has existed for a very long time. So if you're a writer or an artist of some kind or artiste, if you create something of quality, generations later, it can still be speaking to, resonating with, appealing to people who will represent it in a up-to-date fashion that appeals to their taste. Very good. I think we've got one person left. Who would that be? Would that be, oh, I'm not sure. Is there anybody we haven't heard
That's
from?
me. There.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Paige.
Right. So I chose Journey to the West.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that the Chinese mythology that they had in it was very interesting because I looked up some of the, I guess, names, and there's one, I can't pronounce it properly, but I think Yan Ying and Pixie, how she's the goddess of mercy and he's the spirit of greed. So I thought the incorporation of the mythology was quite interesting.
Yes. Thank you, Paige. I'm trying to find the reactions button. I'm sorry I didn't think of it for the other people. So if I didn't put up a reactions button for you, that doesn't mean that your presentation wasn't a good one too. It's just that, you know, I'm not good at multitasking. So yes, in the history of Chinese literature and many literatures of the world, the stories that go back to ancient times often provide resources that modern writers, whether in ancient times or now, whoever the modern writers would have been at the time, can draw on and draw on to enrich what they're doing. Paige, are you Barbadian?
Yes, I'm Barbadian.
Yes. The last novel that I read recently, I'm going to get to in a minute, Aisha. The last novel I read recently was by a Barbadian young woman. I can get the book and tell you what the name is now. Yes, I don't know if you'll be able to see it when I put it in front of the screen. I'm going to come out of the, what do you call it? The virtual background mode. I'm going to none.
Hi,
hopefully
Sam,
you'll be
I
able
think
to
you
see.
should, yes, yes, yes.
Good.
Now, yes, you can
It's
see.
called My Fishy Stepmom, and it's by a Barbadian young woman called Shakira Bourne, who has entered NIFCA, the National Independence of Literary and Creative Arts, many times, and she's a multiple award winner. And in this, My Fishy Stepmom, she has drawn on Caribbean mythology to write about what I would call a perennial situation. Think of it as a kind of like Barbadian Cinderella story with variation. So people are writers, movie producers, songwriters, and so on, writers of plays, find inspiration in different cultures in the things of the past. Yes, Miss Smith, I think you were the one with your hand up. We've got 1 minute left. Go ahead.
Hi, sir. I just wanted to know, does the character E only pertains to war or like, well, pertains to war?
No, not as far as I understand it. But Teacher
Okay.
Grace and Teacher Alex, who are Chinese natives of the land, would be able to give you a more definitive answer.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't catch what's.
I was wondering if the character E is only pertaining to war.
And this one, which one? You mean this for which?
I'm going to do screen sharing of the character race. Just tell me when you can see it.
Yeah, I was wondering if it's pertaining to war because when they broke it down, they said it's made up of sheep, which means prosperity, and I myself, which originated from a fighting tool with a sharp tooth. But then as I was going along the novel, it dealt with war, and the general was a warrior. So I was wondering if it's pertaining to being true and righteous as a warrior, or it's general.
Oh, you know this E is this is a traditional Chinese. So you are talking about this related with the war.
Yeah.
I think Grace, what she's asking is if the concept is exclusive to war or if it is a general concept that an individual could try to embody. You could show righteousness in all kinds of situations, and war is only one of them. Okay, everybody, I thank you for being here this evening. I am going, please put your email in the chat. I want to send you the PowerPoint and some instructions, but as I told you, I have a class now at 6 o'clock. So if you can put your email in the chat.
Next class, yes, maybe next class.
Or Teacher
Okay.
Grace can send me all your emails. I presume she would have them.
Yeah, Alex will do it.
And also, finally, I'd like you to email me, put a copy of your Word file with your KWLS chart that you were working in this evening. Put a copy in the chat, load it in the chat so I can download it from there.
Yeah, I can send students' email to you. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I can get the emails from them. And now I'd like them to upload the document they were working with in the chat so I can get it from there.
Yeah.
And I bid you all a good evening. Teacher Grace, we can talk tomorrow. I have to teach now till 8 o'clock. So
Okay, good.
tomorrow I'll give you a call.
Okay, all right. Bye-bye. Bye, Jen.
Bye-bye. So
Okay,
I'm
bye-bye.
checking the chat for the Word file.
Sarah, was there anything else more that had to be in the Word chat other than the stuff about the novels?
No, you're sending me the whole file, the file that has the KWL chart, which you were working in. Everything you wrote this evening should have been in that document.
Oh, I joined late. Oh.
Okay, well, what you can do is you can put it into the document and then you can send it to Teacher Grace and she can send it to me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, okay.
I think send it to the coordinator, Alex.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, I
well,
can.
send it to Alex and then he can send it to me.
Okay,
But
I can
would like
give
to
your
do it as
email.
soon as
Yeah,
possible
give your
in
emails
terms
to
of
the
what I'm
students
planning for Thursday.
so they
All
can
right,
send
all
it
right.
to you. Yeah. Okay.
Right, Jerisa, I've got yours.
Okay.
Good. This is the high. What is this?
Grace, I have to go. I have another
Yeah,
class
yes,
now.
please, just a little bit about the E. Yes, yeah. So this is not this.
No, Grace,
Yes. Okay.
I
All
have a
right. So
class
maybe
now. I have
next
to teach a class right now.
Okay. All right. Next class. Okay. Bye bye.
You're saying something? Yeah, I haven't forgotten. I remember. Okay.
Sir.
Yes. Do you have any question?
Yes, I had mentioned in the chat that I was going to be late, and as I was late, I do not know what was supposed to be in the file from the beginning of the class. So I'm asking if you can just help me out with that.
Okay, yeah. Did you get this file so I can share the screen? At the beginning of the class, yeah, and Mr. Sawyer sent you all a file. It's like this, yeah. Do you have this
That was
file?
in the chat or on e-learning?
I can send it in the group, okay, yeah.
Thank
He
you.
sent in the Zoom, yeah. I can send it to you in the group. At the beginning of the class, he sent I think two files, yeah. On this one, yeah. At the beginning of class, he sent two files, this one and this one. And later he sent the other four files. I think you've all got it about the four novels. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got this one?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I can send this two to the group. Yeah. So you can fill in this file and send it back to Mr. Sawyer. Yeah. Okay.
So we just have to read on the files and just fill it in.
Yeah,
Okay.
and send it back. Yeah. So what you already know, what you want to know, what you learned, and you still want to know. Okay.
Okay.
I will send it in the group. Okay, bye-bye. If you have any question, you can ask in the group, yeah, the WhatsApp group.
Okay. Bye, sir.
All right, bye, sir.
Okay, bye-bye.